72 pounds of human flesh dissolving in a 57-gallon vat of acid. That is what police found waiting inside apartment 213. The air didn't just smell bad, it tasted like copper and rot. A suffocating blanket of decay clinging to the back of your throat. This wasn't a remote slaughterhouse. It was a residential building in Milwaukee filled with families who politely waved to their quiet neighbor in the hallway. That neighbor was Jeffrey Dahmer. If you want a crime story that strips away the glamour to expose the absolute bottom of human soul, you have found it. This true crime story is about the devastating price of feeding the shadow, the horrific cost of a compulsion left unchecked. Before we open that apartment door entirely, you need to understand the blue 57-gallon drum. That drum was a terrifying evolution of a dark habit that started with a simple wooden box in a childhood forest. We will get back to that wooden box later. There is a profound, terrifying silence that exists in the dead of night. It is the kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound like a marching drum. Jeffrey Dahmer lived entirely within that suffocating silence. Long before he became the monster plastered across every television screen, he was a ghost haunting his own life. The shadow didn't suddenly consume him overnight. It was a slow drip, a steady poisoning of the mind that started in the humid, overgrown woods behind his childhood home in Ohio. There, the earth was damp, smelling of wet pine needles and rotting leaves. He would spend hours completely alone, dissecting roadkill, stripping away fur and muscle to reveal the stark, white bone beneath. It wasn't malice driving him then, but a cold, detached curiosity, a desperate need to understand the mechanics of life and death and how to freeze time. He wanted permanent companions. People leave, people disappoint, bones do not. As the years dragged on, that quiet obsession mutated. The dead animals were no longer enough to feed the dark passenger riding in his mind. The shadow demanded more. It demanded humanity. When he moved into the Oxford apartments in Milwaukee, the environment perfectly mirrored his internal decay. The beige hallways smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and cheap cooking oil. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a relentless, maddening hum. It was a place of transient lives, where people came and went, and no one asked too many questions. It was the perfect hunting ground. He would venture out into the neon-soaked streets, walking through the sticky summer heat, drawn to the pulsing bass of local clubs. He wasn't looking for a quick thrill or a fleeting connection. He was looking for absolute, total possession. Stepping into his apartment was like stepping out of reality. He kept the temperature freezing. The air conditioner rattled continuously, a desperate attempt to mask the thick, sweet stench of death seeping into the wallpaper. He burned cheap incense, sticks of sandalwood that mixed with the metallic tang of blood to create an odor so foul it would make a grown man violently ill. Yet he sat in the middle of it, completely numb, drinking cheap beer and watching television as if everything were entirely normal. He lured his victims with promises of money, companionship, and a few drinks. They walked through his door expecting a temporary escape from their own lives, completely unaware they were stepping into a meticulously crafted tomb. He offered them a drink, heavily laced with sleeping pills. The transition from life to death in apartment 213 was rarely violent at the start. It was a quiet slipping away, a heavy sleep from which they would never wake. Only when the victim was completely incapacitated did the true nightmare begin. He didn't just want to kill them. He wanted to keep them permanently. He believed that by consuming parts of them, they would become a permanent part of his own biological makeup. But there was one specific night involving a man named Tracy that would shatter this cycle. We will come to Tracy's desperate escape shortly because what he saw defies all logic. Remember that wooden box in the Ohio woods? The one he used to store bleached bones of raccoons and stray cats? That was a prototype. The blue 57-gallon drum in Milwaukee was simply the industrial, adult version of that childhood box. It was a monument to his absolute failure to maintain the permanence he so desperately craved. Flesh rots. It decays. It liquefies. No matter what harsh chemicals he used, he could never halt the inevitable process of decomposition. The shadow he fed demanded absolute control, but nature refused to comply. The more he tried to preserve his victims, the more he was forced to destroy them entirely. The drum was his grim admission of defeat. He was drowning in his own creation, trapped in a relentless cycle of hunting, killing, preserving, and destroying. The psychological toll of maintaining this horrific double life was immense. He was drinking heavily, his hands constantly shaking, his mind a fractured mirror reflecting only paranoia. The meticulous planner was becoming sloppy. He left evidence in plain sight, subconsciously begging to be caught. The breaking point finally arrived with Tracy. He was lured to the apartment under the same false pretenses, the offer of cash for taking some photographs. But the atmosphere inside was unbearable. The smell was suffocating. Dahmer was erratic, his eyes vacant, his movements jerky and completely unpredictable. When Dahmer snapped a handcuff onto Tracy's wrist, the illusion shattered. Tracy realized with a cold, terrifying certainty that he was not going to walk out of that room. He fought with the primal, adrenaline-fueled strength of a man staring directly into the abyss. He struck Dahmer, breaking free and running out into the hallway, bursting through the front doors and flagging down a passing police cruiser. When the officers returned to apartment 213 with Tracy, they walked into a literal slaughterhouse. They opened the refrigerator expecting groceries. Instead, they found the severed head of a human being. They found horrifying Polaroids scattered in an open drawer, documenting the atrocity in visceral detail. The shadow had finally been dragged into the unforgiving light. The price of feeding the shadow is total, inevitable consumption. Jeffrey Dahmer thought he could control the darkness, carving out space for monstrous desires while maintaining a facade of normalcy. But the shadow always demands more. It eats away your sanity, destroying everything you touch until there is nothing left but rot. This crime story remains a chilling chapter in American history because it forces us to confront a terrifying reality. Monsters do not hide under our beds. They live next door. The true crime story of the Milwaukee cannibal reflects the absolute depths of human depravity. When you feed the shadow, it eventually feeds on you.
Welcome to Crime Reveals.